So fellas, Vladimir Putin drops a bombshell. Unbelievable. I mean, you know, some of African presidents went to Ukraine, then Russia, to go have a discussion with both presidents, hopefully find a peace agreement, which was very interesting. We told you the stories with the South African delegation that was stopped in Warsaw at the airport for 24 hours. That was shameful, absolutely shameful. And they went to Ukraine via Poland, had a discussion with Zelensky, then headed to St. Petersburg in Russia to discuss with President Putin. Now, what's happened there was very, very interesting. The discussion, Vladimir Putin came out with stories that not many people know and really putting to shame many of the narrative that we all know. Let's go through it very quickly. So the African delegation, which included the President of South Africa, Senegal, Zambia, and Prime Minister of Egypt, arrived in Moscow following the meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa presented a 9-point roadmap to end hostility, calling both sides to de-escalate.
And we are here to communicate a very clear message that we would like this war to be ended.
Obviously, President of Africa, for some reason, I don't know why Africans love to be so nice to even people that are not necessarily nice to us. They decided to go to Russia and Ukraine, have a discussion with President Putin and his counterpart from Ukraine to have a discussion, hopefully, to de-escalate the conflict. Because as per some studies, Africa is suffering when it comes to seed that are usually purchased from Ukraine. So right now, Russia has blocked the port where the seed could come to Africa, and that brings out big problems for many African countries. I don't know if you have issues with seed in your country. I'm not sure, but that's supposedly one of the main reasons why African presidents came together to have a discussion with both Russia and Ukrainian president. Now, they have arrived in Ukraine at a discussion with the Ukrainian president, then headed to Russia to discuss with the Russian president. But unfortunately, this attempt to peace talk between Russia and Ukraine has not been successful. Yes, African presidents were hoping to have it successful, but it was not successful because Vladimir Putin came out with a story that shocked everybody.
Он так и называется. Договор о постоянном нейтралитете и гарантиях безопасности Украины. Именно о гарантиях, о которых вы сказали, уважаемый друг и президент Южноафриканской Республики. 18 статей. Более того, к нему есть еще и приложение. Они, знаете, сейчас даже не буду об этом говорить. Они касаются и вооруженных сил, касаются других вещей. Все прописано до единиц боевой техники и до личного состава вооруженных сил. Вот этот документ. И он парафирован киевской делегацией. Подпись стоит.
In fact, Putin showed for the first time draft documents that were being discussed by the Russian and Ukrainian emissary in Turkey more than a year ago. We haven't heard about that. The document was signed by Ukraine last year in Turkey. According to Putin, the document titled Treaty of Permanent Neutrality and Security Guarantee for Ukraine had been signed by Ukrainian delegation. So Putin said that this document was signed, they had an agreement, but Ukraine violated this agreement. Let's watch.
Он парафирован киевской делегации. Подпись стоит. Но после того, как мы, как и обещали, отвели войска от Киева, киевские власти, как обычно, делают их хозяева, выбросили это все на свалку истории. Скажем так, аккуратно и постараюсь интеллигентно выражаться.
So he said the draft stipulate that Ukraine must enshrine permanent neutrality in its constitution. Russia, US, Britain, China, and France are listed as guarantors. So Ukraine must change its constitution. And Ukraine must obviously have a limited number of arsenal and military personnel. And Ukraine must content itself with the part that Ukraine is supposed to have. So in other words, a big area of Ukraine will be ingrained in Russia. A big area of Ukraine that's Russophone, where people speak Russian, should be in Russia. Putin said Ukraine was responsible for sabotaging the negotiation. After we pulled our troops away from Kiev, as we had promised to do, the Kiev authority had tossed the treaty away into the dustbin of history. So basically what he's saying here is what? They had a discussion with the Ukrainian government, and the discussion entailed that Russians will pull out their troops from Kiev. Because I don't know if you remember when the war started, Russian military were right around Kiev, the capital. Do you remember that? Then very slowly we heard them pulling away. But on the big news, they said the Ukrainians are very strong, the Russians are running away. Or some news said the Russians are pulling away. It's a strategic move. Do you remember that? It's a strategic move, pulling away from Kiev. Now, Putin said that was not the case. He says that the reality was they agreed with the Ukrainians, we're going to pull out our troops from Kiev. Then we're going to respect the agreement as it is. And now, after Russian soldiers had pulled away from Kiev, Ukrainians were supposed to respect the treaty or the contract. They did not. Putin says to the African president, if they did not respect the contract the first time, where are the guarantees that they will not walk away from this agreement in the future? Just in the beginning of the war, they sat down and had a discussion. After the discussion, they agreed to something. Then very shortly, I don't know if you remember, Boris Johnson of the UK went to Ukraine. Do you remember that? Boris Johnson walked through the street of Kiev, had a discussion. Followed by Nancy Pelosi of the United States. She also went to Ukraine to have a discussion. Anthony Blinken was there. Then Ursula von der Leyen of Europe, they had a discussion. And after they left the country, Ukrainians changed. They did not want to agree with Putin anymore. They wanted to go to war. Now, what conclusion can we pull out of that? Could it mean that Boris Johnson, Nancy Pelosi, Anthony Blinken, and Ursula von der Leyen came to Ukraine and said, you know what? You're not going to give in to Putin. We're going to support you financially. We're going to support you when it comes to weapons. We're going to support you with intelligence and funding so you can fight the war to the death. Could that be right to say? I mean, can we allow ourselves to think that way? Because, I mean, look, you were right at the door of negotiation. You had to sit down and discuss, and you signed. Then all of a sudden, you get visitors coming to you, and all of a sudden, boom, you want to fight. And you're asking the visitors to send you weapons. You remember President of Ukraine asking for weapons? We need weapons, after the visit of these people that I've mentioned earlier. So, in other words, Putin has showed to the world that we had signed an agreement. It's not me the problem. We sat down in Turkey and an agreement signed. And after signing this agreement, who walked out of the agreement? They walked out of the agreement. So the African delegation, which included the President of South Africa, Senegal, Zambia, and Prime Minister of Egypt, were in Moscow and to discuss with Vladimir Putin. Very disappointed to see that whatever they're trying to do was for nothing. And also seeing them in Ukraine, walking the street of Kiev, transporting flowers. We understand and appreciate that out of respect for the people that have passed. It's a good deed, good thing to see President of Africa do such thing. But this raises the question, where are they when things happen in Africa? I mean, these are the same president that went to France years back when there was that story with Charlie Hebdo when many people were... Do you remember that story? African president went to France. Some of them cried. But where are they when things happen in Africa? Many people have passed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've seen nobody, at least not at that level, people coming together to go try and resolve this problem within the African continent. Yeah, we respect what they've done in Kiev and stuff. That's very good. But doesn't good charity begins home? I mean, why don't you take care of home? I mean, things have happened in Senegal a couple of days ago. Many people have, nobody has said a thing about that. I mean, I don't know. Are the things that are happening next doors and elsewhere more important than things that are happening back home? I don't know. That's a good question we need to answer. So basically, President of Africa, I think Uganda sent a delegation as well to go and have a discussion between Vladimir Putin and Zelensky of Ukraine. And unfortunately, it failed. Some of the politicians in Ukraine said this is a very primitive attempt for a false peace. Primitive attempt for a false peace. You believe that? A primitive attempt by African government for false peace. That's what some Ukrainians have said. So they are primitive, in other words. They don't want this war to end. Because like I said before, like many people think, it's making a lot of money for many people. The Lockheed Martin, all these companies selling weapons to Ukraine, it's not for free. We're sending $20 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine. It's not for free. Ukraine has to repay this money. All these buildings crashing, destroyed and stuff, infrastructure. Somebody has to build it up. Building it up is not for free. There are companies that have already come to Ukraine to take that market. It's business. And well, as long as none of our people is... And Ukrainian, again, I said, is a field right now for testing. They're testing so many things. They have one system where they get your details on your data. You can use that system to go buy tickets, airplane. You have your passport included. You have your whole life, your medical insurance in it. So it's a testing ground for many new technology and many new things. So I want to know what you think about this. Should the African president go to Ukraine and Russia have a discussion? Was this a great opportunity for Vladimir Putin to show the world that he had a discussion with Ukrainian? He did not not make a noise about it in the past, but he's obliged to show people papers where he actually wanted peace. They had agreed to peace agreement. But once the Europeans and Americans came in, the peace was thrown out the window. Let me know how you feel about this. Really a good pleasure. God bless.